As we do, Gregory, can we get a quick update from the land, from the maple farm? Is springing yet on the East Coast, or are you still in some post-winter vibes?
Yeah, spring is springing. It is peak sugaring season, which means that the days are probably up in the. I've got my window to the office open. The days are probably up in the, edging up to 50 degrees Fahrenheit here, and the nights are down below freezing.
Ooh.
And I saw the first snowdrops, the first flowers, first snowdrops of the year coming up in our yard. So they're just edging up. We're starting to get a little color back, but mostly it's still kind of the brown time of year here in New
Yeah.
England. Um,
Well, I hate to be to remind you of how amazing the West Coast is, but we are deep in wildflower season, deep in the greens of new life
yeah,
everywhere.
it'll last for another 2 weeks before the forest fires start again.
Hey, don't rain on my parade, but it is absolutely gorgeous out here on the West Coast. I spent the last weekend camping at a place about an hour from me, and had black bears and mule deer and eagles and hawks and wildflowers about, and it was and osprey, and it was just magical time, reminding me of what the work we're doing here, and also just to be in awe of what exists. It is so incredible here. But anyhow, I digress. Great. Thank you, everyone, for piling in. Just as a reminder, feel free to, if you have want to jump up and jam, we're going to be digging into Regen Commons. There's been a ton moving in this space. Gregory's got some, I think, potent updates to share about what's happened since ETH Denver, which, as always, just feels like it's lifetimes away in today's 24-hour news cycle. But important developments as we went from Denver, we landed at funding the Commons in San Francisco to continue and build upon the conversation at the Cello offices, which I thought was quite enlivening. And by the way, big shout out to the Cello community. They had Vitalik and Renee and Merrick all convened with the Cello community on the 25th for their launch of their L2. And anyhow, it's just really excited for them, and it was really great to be in their offices and enjoy space and conversation with a really interesting cross-section of humans, all of whom continue to be leaned in around what does the Regen Commons look like? How do we show up? What are the kind of what must be true? What would be nice? And how do we move forward? So with that kind of setting, Gregor, do you want to bring us up to speed?
Yeah, I'll do my best to just kind of like share back a little bit of context where I see things are going. I'll also try to share again, just kind of like high level, what the hell are we talking about? Because I know there's an uneven distribution of how closely people have been able to follow this emerging concept and idea. And then I would just really love to invite. I see a bunch of people out in the audience already who are deep in this dialogue and deep in this process. I just love for you all to raise hands so that Dave can invite you up onto stage. I see Griff just joined. Thank you, Griff. Stoked to have you. Also, yeah, come up. So just as I'm giving just a little bit of a overview of where things are at, I just had some calls with Spork DAO. I've been working on ordering and organizing things, so I'll do a report back, but raise your hands, and Dave will get you up on stage. And then we can start to dialogue. At a high level, I think the intention for this Twitter Spaces is really just to continue this practice of having kind of an open forum community conversation, just a space and a rhythm to dialogue. I think so without further ado, I'll start kind of doing my report back. So essentially, our conversations in San Francisco were, I think, really focused on just generating a little bit more opportunity with a little bit of water under the bridge away from East Denver, where some of the energy around the becoming of this idea of Regen Commons had to do with kind of feelings of exclusion and feelings of adversarialness and grist and grit, which I think kind of was important to form a sense of community around, but also was really important to take a step back from and to sort of do a vibe shift. So the vibe shift that I've been feeling around the Regen Commons idea is a pretty significant shift from a lot of the conversation in person that I've been uh, witnessing and participating in, being a lot less about, what is the definition of regen or what is the fair use agreement around the trademark, and much more kind of what needs to be true in order for us to increase our capacity and capability to coordinate, to cooperate, and how does having a commons, that is a boundary where there is a clear community with agreements within itself, um, instrumental in achieving that higher order of cooperation. And there's just a lot of really exciting ideas and good vibes. And just generally speaking, I think where we're at right now is we're still very much in the proto DAO phase of the Regen Commons. Um, we're I'm still having calls with Spork DAO, which has committed $20,000 and working on making that commitment come true. So that's a parallel process is taking place. We have regencommons.com, which the Ethereal Vin at the Ethereal Forest crew created and has been stewarding, which has a nice forum. Hey, I see Vin's in there. Excited to have you come up if you'd like to. Um, and we have a couple of chats. We have a commitment from Regen Network Development to put the Regen Network and associated Regen trademarks into the commons, right? For a community to define fair use. We also have really exciting commitments from other community members to start putting in other IP, software licenses, and brands. And people who have spoken towards their excitement about that, although I don't think we're at the stage of, sort of like passing the hat around quite yet, include ReFi DAO, include the Owaki with Green Pill and Gitcoin, include Block Science and MetaGov. And I'm sure that there's Todd Youngblood at Vivero, and Evan at Center for Collaborative Economics also has having a conversation. He's like, "Oh, that sounds really exciting. That sounds really interesting." And so, just to recap, kind of the idea behind that, and then we're gathering more people up on stage. So I'm excited to start to open the dialogue. The idea behind that comes from this concept that Primavera Di Filippi and other friends, she's a legal researcher at Berkman Klein Center for Law at Harvard, and kind of a leading artistic lawyer in the Web3 space, have been sort of socializing this idea of copy fair and this idea of a collaboration monster in which you utilize trademark, copyright, and other intellectual property rights, not to enclose specific ideas, but to create a commons where you can very efficiently and effectively share licenses and resources and data and information inside a community of trust that's values aligned. But you can also kind of gate and create a membrane around that community so that more transactional interactions can be carefully designed. So it's kind of a middle ground between a fully sort of open source, free, like FOSS, free open source software approach, where it's just like, this is free public good, right? And this is a private good. Instead, it's sort of thinking about intellectual property, memes, and brands as something that could be commoned around, that we could actually create a commons where there is a boundary and there are agreements, but those boundaries and agreements are governed by all of the commoners equally instead of by a single corporation. And this feels like it really sort of like uplifts and is an embodiment of the Regen vibes, and has been a long time aspiration, and feels like we have the momentum around this. So I'm going to take a pause after having kind of given everybody a chance to hop up and get on stage. I see Todd is there. Hey, Todd, excited to see you. And I'm going to see if anybody wants to jump in. Maybe I'll just pass the baton on to you, Griff. How's it going? GM.
GM, thanks for having me. Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is super cool. I especially, I'm like, oh yeah, IP, it's like a necessary evil that we have to deal with. But just the idea of bringing this as more of a Schelling point for the Regen Commons concept to make some effort to coordinate a little bit better around doing the Regen work that so many of us are trying to do in the space that is often crowded out by all the gambling and DeFi and other more commercially appealing ideas. So yeah, that's all. I'm just here to kind of play along and shepherd the role and support in any way that I can. I'll throw it back to you though.
Yeah, well, just to, I'm going to continue to try to be just like level setting, because so much of this is just like disseminating information because we don't yet have kind of like a full coordinating system yet, right? So again, saying to everybody, welcome. I see Zargum's out there. I see Corey from Regions Unites out there. If anybody wants to hop up on stage and dialogue, if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, if you'd like to chip in, this is a great venue to just sort of hop up on stage and engage. Just to reiterate, Griff's role in all of this is he is one of the multi-sig signers that of the sort of I'd say the multi-sig, which was created to receive the $20,000 from Spork DAO. I've really been trying to make sure that SporkDAO and all the multi-stakeholders and everybody else in the community understands that the idea of that multi-sig is not actually to govern the commons or to participate in any way really as a power center, but instead simply to be the administrative body that receives some money and hires a person or a group of people to run a participatory body or participatory process to create the real kind of commons approach. And we've been jamming with Zargum and Block Science about that. We've been, I know that Corey and Regions Unite, I know that Scott at RefiDAO and Benjamin Life at Open Civics all have expressed interest and excitement around that process where we start to build credibility and legitimacy around what this commons could be. So I just kind of want to be clear that that's been the intention. I'm super grateful for Griff and the other multi-stakeholders like Zargum, because it is really kind of a thankless task where really all we're trying to do is, in a publicly transparent way, receive some money and hire people. One last update that I'll share, since Griff and Zargum are both here, is that I had a conversation with SporkDAO board 2 days ago, and they suggested something that I really liked, which is that actually we create an RFP for different community members to suggest like how they would like to see that process go, and essentially like an RFP to be contracted to run the sort of movement from proto DAO to DAO. So I thought that was a great suggestion. Zargum, welcome up. Good to see you. Where are you calling in from?
I am in upstate New York, and I have a few minutes, and I wanted to hop in and say hi. I'm also, as Gregory said, one of the multi-sig members, and I got kind of pulled into that at ETH Denver this year in service of commoning. And I actually wanted to like make some comments about something you said earlier around IP that I hope would be clarifying, and that is that intellectual property is a construct that was created in a way to safeguard people who were producing intellectual outputs and putting them into the commons and then basically getting exploited. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of other things that have gone wrong with that system, and it's grown and become quite predatory in the opposite direction. But I always like to highlight the fact that systems, they come into existence for reasons in circumstances. And so part of what we're facing here is that problem again. Like, we reverted to an extremely permissionless approach to knowledge production, maintenance, cultural object production and maintenance, and then we start to succumb to some of the same failure modes that gave rise to that system in the first place, which is a little bit ironic, but also not that surprising. And so we're coming to this now with a very commons-based mental model. And just for like some heuristics, things that can make sense at small scales. Again, small scales meaning higher trust, relatively enforceable, are like, you have certain community members who are within the boundaries of that common, and they're subject to rules, norms, and shared strategies around the usage of those shared assets. And again, here, brand assets, intellectual property, cultural capital, etc., are the things we're talking about. But like, there's mechanisms in place to monitor and police and enforce sort of misuse in ways that harm that exploit the knowledge, harm the brand, degrade the culture, and so on, with the caveat that things like culture and knowledge are not necessarily easily discretized. They're not like things you can stack up. They're more holistic objects, and it's not always clear whether something is adding or taking from it. But at the simplest level, the kind of commons that we're dealing with is one where we have shared sense of what is legitimate use of these brand assets, and of the construction and maintenance of the culture and knowledge around regenerativity within a crypto and beyond landscape. And I just want to like encourage people to view this not as a step into like IP, and more of a like returning to the state where IP was then brought into existence, and asking, well, how do we solve this problem? How do we want to approach it? And for us, I think simple things are going to be like certain, opting in by using the brand patterns. So like, if you're using the brand, then you obligate yourself to, and that certain amount of those obligations are heavier than others. Like, you might have very different expectations if you are commercializing. So like, in the IP space, you look at like CC, NC, Creative Commons, non-commercial. You're like, okay, but like, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't actually mean no one commercializes. It just means that the default license under which the thing is distributed to is not for commercial use. If you take it and use it in a commercial way, then you're actually violating the license. But that doesn't preclude the existence of other licenses that have commercial rights, but you might only get access to them if you're, demonstrably in a permissioned contributor set. And again, these are the kind of models that get explored in and around different kinds of data and IP commons. There's also more traditional, clearinghouse, club good IP commercialization patterns that are actually quite old and boring. And what I'm really trying to say is like, I want to say like, we're reinventing the wheel without not knowing about the wheel. Like, what I'm asking for here is for people to like not start from scratch and make all the same mistakes. I'm saying start from a blank sheet of paper with knowledge of other things that have happened in the past. And so that was one of my biggest contribution here, is to just like make sure that we're holding the line between new and different and novel emergence of new institutions, and like, shit, this is an ancient problem of these like collective shared common pool resources, that there are many stakeholders with different opinions about how they should be exercised. And to kind of bring it around to where Gregory ended with the RFP and stuff, we also just want to be like attentive to the legitimacy of the processes through which we set these things up, using open source software experience as a basis for this. There's a reason why you have beneficent dictators, why organizations emerge with some amount of charismatic central leadership, is because it's actually an important shelling point in the cultural production, value setting, and so on. And so we do have to strike a balance between like making things inclusive and participatory, and also like expertise and charisma and shelling points and the ability to get the job done. In the work on engineering legitimacy that I did with Alon Ben Meir, it was actually tied into a professional service network research project for the Arbitrum Foundation. We do talk a good bit about the trade-offs between sort of legitimacy through process and like legitimacy through outcome and effectiveness. And so for anything that we do here now or later, we're going to have to strike a chord between those two. We're going to have to make sure that we have like everybody involved and participating in requirements and getting aligned around the mission and vision and values. But like if you're also trying to introduce automations and institutional processes and rules, norms, and shared strategies and getting them implemented in a way that's stable and actually stable in the long term, not just we did it, check the box, we published the document or we launched the DAO. I mean, every one of you has probably been in a DAO that went to shit. And it went to shit not because it didn't get shipped. It went to shit because the thing that got shipped didn't actually solve the problems that the specific stakeholders had in the specific environment that that DAO operated in. It wasn't able to perform the mission or purpose that that DAO set out to do, or at least enable the humans there to do that. And so we're going to have that same, again, ancient canonical collective action problem here. And so I always emphasize, like, again, it's very balanced. It's like, on one hand, we need processes and steps and transparency. That's legitimacy by process. We also need effects. We need outcomes. We need ways of characterizing expertise and to make sure that when we run these processes, that people get jobs that they're qualified to do. They're both held accountable for, but also have the authority to execute. Because as an engineer, I'm like, do not give me accountability for something I don't have the authority and the resources to do, but also don't give someone the authority and the resources to do something if you're not going to hold them accountable for doing it. And that's another one of those balances that we really got to strike here. So that's my TED Talk. Got it all in one try. So I'll hang out as long as I can, answer questions if we can get them in before I have to split. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Z. Appreciate it. Well, there's a bunch of amazing people up here. Since Green Pill Dev has got your hand up, let's start with you. Hi, how's it going?
Hey.
Where are you calling in from?
Calling in from San Diego. It's Alpha behind the account. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, loud and
Sweet.
clear.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm putting on my network steward hat because one of the Greenpill network stewards, and I heard like Greenpill IP mentioned as one of the things I'd be steward by this. But from my perspective so far, it's been like a lack of engagement or kind of a like me just hearing that's like kind of coming out of left field in some ways. Because we're still trying to figure out in Greenpill how we like managing things and having governance around certain things of that nature. So I do wonder about like that kind of relationship and I have more questions, but I just want to start there around like this stewardship of IP. What does that look like? If there is a conflict, what does that actually like resolve to? Like who's managing it? Because like I said, we're still trying to figure out within Greenpill how we govern some things. So then to have like IP that's integral to Greenpill then be governed by like a different entity does seem like need more clarity around that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd be curious actually to invite Monty up from Refi DAO, because I think there's some similarities. And Monty in the conversations that we were having at ETH Denver, and Scott, I think, got quite excited, sort of like the opposite reaction to one you're having. And so I think there's like it'd just be interesting to hear how he was thinking of this. I'll just respond with two answers, and then maybe I would just want to make sure to also weave in some other voices here. But so answer number one, from my perspective, is this is the type of question that is going to be worked out, and there's no like if we create an efficient, effective commons, there should be deep value derived creating resources for you to more efficiently and effectively manage and create new IP. And if we're not doing that, then you shouldn't put your IP into it. So that would be my first answer. And the second thing is the idea here is to create a process that ideally is incredibly effective and efficient, that answers those questions and allows you and other members of the broader Regen movement to kind of input needs and desires and allow us to kind of, I guess, kind of compute design over those and then create a design that that really works well. So that's sort of like the process idea that's there. So I'm gonna invite Monty up here, and Jeremy, just before we get to you, just since I kind of called Monty out to speak specifically to this idea about like what might be in it for an organization to bring their own brand and IP into this, I think it'd just be interesting to hear what was getting Monty fired up about that. Hey, Monty, how's it going? Welcome up.
Hey, good to be here. I'm currently sitting in a park in Hackney in London, and it's quite sunny. Just tuning into the conversation, and yeah, lots of thoughts there on that particular point. It's something we've been thinking about, obviously, at ReFi DAO for a while in terms of being this kind of decentralized network of communities. Initially, even starting with just like the ReFi orb, right? Anyone just puts the ReFi orb behind their profile picture and is signaling, hey, we're part of this ReFi movement, and cool. And then expanding that to local nodes, well, we've got a whole kind of template of assets that you can see. But then when you get to the question of like governance around those assets, like what happens if a ReFi local node, claiming to be part of ReFi DAO, goes and starts doing some illegal or just terrible stuff, and then they're tarnishing the brand of ReFi DAO and the wider ReFi movement. And so how do you kind of govern that IP and that brand and network, which is kind of the core binding force of the DAO, but it's quite decentralized. So yeah, just have been interested in, okay, like one method is, you try and set up some complicated legal entity which is expensive, and really we don't want to be really dealing with much enforcement, and it's not really what we'd want to be doing. But actually, if there is this commons entity that is set up, it has a structure, and theoretically, if ReFi DAO was able to participate in that and pull those assets into a commons and sort of gift that into a commons, into a community, but also then have some shared governance practices around that. I think that could be quite an interesting model that both solves a problem that we've been thinking about, and reduces the complexity in terms of having to set up those structures as well. So it's not something I'm rushing into, but just definitely interested to see how the kind of structure and the Regen Commons and all of this kind of work emerges, and definitely open to continuing evaluate if it does make sense for ReFi DAO, and maybe it does for Green Pill and Regen Coordination and Regen Network and other entities as well, to kind of all come into this commons. But there's obviously still a lot of specifics and technicals, and so yeah, just really at this stage, just monitoring, seeing how it's evolving. And just, I think it's an interesting discussion and problem space.
Awesome. Thanks, Monty, for chipping in. Jeremy, I know, welcome. I know you've been tuning in to this conversation. Excited to have your voice looped in here, and excited to hear where you're at and what you're interested in bringing into the conversation.
What is up, nerds? Long-time listener, first-time caller. Yes, I've been lurking around the conversation, and I'm happy to jump in here in this, not the greatest, but the greatest forum that we have right now, being the Twitter space. I get really excited about the idea of much more towards the point of a knowledge commons. I think much to Monty's point and my nerd Stewart and Greenpill, for sure, we're all having the conversation about how do we handle this shit. And so totally we could absolutely have three different conversations and then come together and compare notes and then come down from there. Or we could maybe accelerate the thing by having those conversations because that's actually a more appropriate container for this type of decision making and stuff. And I think of it much more to the knowledge commons, right? So you nerds have got IP, you've got made a handbook. I made a handbook. We all made a fucking handbook. Where can we put these handbooks? Where's a good place for us to put them all together? So because they form a library, right? So let's create a library together and let's put in it all stuff that and we have a way of evaluating the stuff that we think we know and we actually know, and make sure that it's got good disclosure about how it works in different contexts. This is my, of course, obligatory moment where I have to mention the word liberating structures because I think they're good. And these types of tooling, these collective psychotechnologies are actually distinct unique culture. Like we can look at these interaction games and go, oh, actually, those are the vibe. That's how we create the vibe in this context. And we can actually create extraordinarily robust drugs if we've got ourselves a library that we can all point to and attest to the fact that, hey, there's practice going on there. So I get totally nerded out on the opportunity of creating a big game library that we can all point at and make use of. Anybody else?
Love it. No, I totally love it, Jeremy. Zachary, you're burning to jump in. How's it going? Where are you calling in from? Excited to have you here.
Howdy, y'all. I'm in Montreal right now. And yeah, I'm burning to jump in because I only have a few minutes. I have to start the Purple Transition podcast with Simon Michaud in a few minutes. Exciting news. But yeah, I'm just really excited about all this and was really excited to see this sort of birth out of the meme war at Ethereum Denver and the convergence of so many wonderful people coming together with the shared purpose, the shared story that is regen. We want to regenerate the planet. We want to create a new economic system. We've been having these conversations and talking about things like Ostrom's Commons and commoning and, this secret third thing between the state and the market that is, what we're all here for. And so it's really exciting to see that start to shift into brass tacks, actually defining what does that mean? What is a commons in the 21st century, like in this age of digital, horizontal organization? And so, yeah, there's so many different words and ideas circulating and so many different people talking about platform cooperatives or commoning or federations or collaboration monsters. But really, they're all just different words for us actually coming together and coordinating and collaborating and sharing and going from 1,000 different little tiny organizations with regen in the name into that are all kind of elbowing each other for $5,000 worth of Gitcoin funding into an organism that can actually cooperate and collaborate at scale, that can start to accumulate and share and pool its resources into actual mechanisms for collaboration. And I see so much potential for council structures for these organizations to come together and holonically organize, where we can retain our autonomy, but we're still able to actually come together horizontally and actually work together and actually stop trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. And like what Jeremy's talking about, and create this knowledge commons, create a legal and governance commons, create a huge pool of our resources and our labor and our energy and our solutions, so that we can actually come together as a larger organism and yeah, I mean, save the fucking world, right? That's what we're here for. I don't have that much more to say. I'm just I'm curious about the ensuing conversations that are going to come out of this, of really defining how we can cooperate, how we can take all of this different energy. I mean, I see so many wonderful faces in this space right now, and all of us have the same vibe, and it's beautiful to come to these conferences and to meet in these spaces, but there's still a lot of work to be done in actually overcoming the sort of conditioning of capitalism to do it on our own and start from scratch. And it's just a really beautiful thing to see people coming together, and any way that we can do that, any way that we can support that in storytelling and in allowing people to sort of cohere in a collective vision. I mean, that's, I think, a big part of what this commons is it's a common vision. It's a common ideal and destination that we're all trying to get to. And yeah, the more we can collaborate and come together and share, the more we're going to get there. Hell yeah. Let's fucking go.
Let's fucking go. Hell yeah. Love it. Super exciting. Love the vibe. And thanks for chipping in. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of like circle back to some of the stuff that Zargam was saying, I think it's really important, and I will just admit that I've got a full-time job plus some just working on Regen Network stuff, right? And so I day to day, week to week, am just grinding and sort of at this stage, we're trying to loop in Spork DAO, we're trying to get their contributions so we have a little bit of working capital. I'm also putting in and kind of grinding, thank God, with the support of Claude and GPT for um, just like distilling and trying to kind of document what we already know. Because as Zarga mentioned, there is a lot of prior art, and we do know an awful lot about things. It isn't just a total blank slate. There's sort of guidelines, but I will say I just feel behind. Like I feel like different community members have been asking for better forums, for places to engage and other things. And we are at this moment, this sort of like classical kind of bootstrapping coordination challenge moment in which most of the incentives still exist for us to all move into our own spaces and do our own things for the next Gitcoin round. Or like myself, I got to keep the plates spinning and the engines running at Regen Network, and I got to keep tending the garden there. And I just want to acknowledge that's a real tension that we have around how do we get enough energy together and trust the right group of people to create the right liberating structure, as Jeremy was saying. Like how that is still just honestly an open question. I think we're doing pretty well. I think there's still momentum and engagement and the vibes anytime we're getting together in person, at least, and I think on this Twitter space as well, seem to be really excited, and there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of excitement. But we still are at, I think, at a sensitive moment in which it's going to require a plurality of us to roll our sleeves up and say, hey, if this is going to happen, I'm going to have some part of it. And many people have already been contributing in deep ways. So with that, I kind of want to, Corey, you hopped up as speaker. I'd love to loop you in to just share your thoughts and ideas and questions. Yeah, how's it going, and where are you calling in from?
Hey, I'm good. I'm calling in from Berlin. Been here for the last month, catching up with a lot of close friends here, going to some interesting meetups, riffing a lot on AI and regen recently, actually. And yeah, I've been thinking about, the Regen Commons concept came out of left field for me. I didn't go to East Denver this year because I did not have the energy, frankly. And so it just popped up on Twitter, right? And it was like, oh, this thing is happening now. Okay, there's some people on the ground doing something. And it took me a little bit to understand what was actually going on, because it did sound at first a little bit like we're going to police this word, and it's in our brand name. I'm a core contributor at Regens Unite. So my first thought was, wait a minute, like, how does this affect our organization? Like, we literally have it in our name, and what does this mean? But I'm the type of person I really like to listen first before I talk and just give it time and see who's involved and see what people have to say. And I'm really curious, I'm really curious to see what we may be able to do here, because from my perspective, over the last 3 years, like observing the regen space in Web3, because when I think of regen, I think way broader than Web3. But speaking of just Web3 right now, it feels very dispersed and scrappy still. Lots of little projects, a couple of core bigger projects, but in the end, everyone's still, it's often even just still quite competitive purely out of necessity. When you look at funding rounds, if you look at the solutions that people are building, ideally, what would be amazing is if what we're creating here is something that is going to facilitate and incentivize us to stack our solutions, and to fundraise together collectively, just to be able to pool our efforts and talent in a new way. That would be amazing. So we've talked a lot about coordination, and it's a very clear point. But also for me, it's having Regen in our brand and being an events brand. Over the years, I've had this struggle with basically the PR issue that Regen faces. I've tried to partner with certain organizations in the space that have turned down like partnership opportunities with us because we had Regen in our name, and they didn't want to have Regen publicly displayed in the name of the event or be like very closely associated with a Regen crowd, because they were afraid that the audience they were trying to attract wouldn't show up to the event. Because Regen is not seen as serious. It's not seen as something that's really driving real impact. It's not seen as like where people are actually building effective things. And this is just come across my way even recently. So it's not a thing of like far of the past. It's just time and time again I've run into that issue, and I realized, yeah, there's just it's a weak narrative right now, and I think it's also born out of a bit of this lack of collaboration. There's strength in numbers, right? So the more that we can find ways to build on top of each other and to coordinate more effectively and to run stronger collectively, I think all in all we're going to have a bigger, like, it's going to improve also the impact of even that term regen and the perception around it. And I don't know, I've been thinking about this a lot because that's a very exciting prospect that it may even from like a comms and storytelling perspective be able to like improve this a lot, and also showcase our impact collectively. That would be very cool. Everyone is like on trying to showcase their impact individually, and I mean, how amazing would it be to have, like, I know this might be far-fetched, but like one giant impact report for the entire regen space in Web3, and like show what the flow is between solutions. I don't know, just been dreaming about that a little bit because it would make it so much easier to have conversations externally outside of the Web3 space, with organizations. And yeah, there's so many partnership opportunities there, funding opportunities, and it would be great to be able to like hand them something that is way bigger than like one specific organization's work. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents where my
I
brain is at.
I love it. I'm totally with you. I love where your brain is at. And Zachary, you've got your hand up, so why don't you dive in,
Yeah, I
man?
just want to plus one, two of those points. One about the impact metrics, that if all the different organizations, even just the ones specifically with regen in their names, came together and said, okay, here's how we fit together, here's how we flow, here's what I'm doing, here's how what I'm doing reinforces what you're doing. How do we come together and say, okay, we're doubling work, let's stack the functions here so that we're not wasting our time on doubling the work. Let's find who's furthest along in these different points and help support them and create this circularity and this flow between the projects. And then exactly like what Corey was saying, just take all the numbers that we can muster. We have 5 people in this group and they've raised $10,000. Okay, not so impressive to the system. But if you have 5 or 10 different organizations that each have 5 to 10 people and have each raised, 10 to $1 million, and you pool all those together into one big giant number, then it suddenly becomes really a lot more impressive. And the second point that I wanted to make is about storytelling, and it's all story. It's all story all the way down. And that's what Another World is Possible, the organization we've been developing and the system that we've been developing for meta storytelling, is really developing the practice to help organizations and inter-organizations come together and sort of harmonize themselves on that shared vision and come into a process. And I just want to volunteer, our efforts to helping facilitate that process to bring together a sort of council of some of these organizations as they start to form together and actually work us through a process that allows us to sort of figure out what is our shared purpose, what is our vision, and what is the mission to get there, into creating basically interactive AI oracles for these systems that we can continually pool and add to over time, that become more and more automated and regenerative, where we can generate story and material and information, and that also allow us to basically figure out who we are and what we're doing. Because right now it's really discordant and it's all over the place, even though we all agree on so many things. But we just need to come into a process where we're actually speaking them into existence and then circling them around and spiraling them through our own organizations and our collectives and our collaborations, and then broadcasting that out there into a really big, beautiful story that shows people that regen is not a vibe. It is a thing that's happening. And regen isn't just one particular form of refi or one specific thing. It's really like bringing the real world into all of these digital networks. It's really about regenerating our social system. It's a meme that is almost infinitely applicable, but we just haven't really cracked how we can communicate and tell that story in the highest impact way yet.
Love it. Monty.
Love that. Yeah, I was just wanting to build on the point that Corey was making at the end there, and also Zachary alluding to as well. But this piece around how do we tell a larger collective story and aggregate some of the like impact metrics and all of the things that's going on in the space. Obviously, speaking from RefiDAO's perspective, got these decentralized network of local node might not be, cool, but might not be impressive to a funder, etc. Aggregating across all of the local nodes, bit cooler. Aggregating then across RefiDAO, but also Greenpool Network and the Bloom Network and Regen Network and all of these other organizations, and telling a much larger story is an exciting narrative. And so, yeah, been going very deep on this thing called the Common Approach and the Common Impact Data Standard for how do we actually aggregate those metrics, but also have and allow for that pluralism of metric rather than forcing people to report in the same way. And how do you manage that? It gets a bit technical, but it's interesting. And so, yeah, really excited to continue working on that problem, obviously with regen coordination, but then also pooling that into the commons. And one other thing that's worth mentioning is that we worked with Carbon Copy to do this state of refi industry report, kind of like how they do industry reports in more conventional financial and business sectors, but for the refi space, to try and get the map of what are the most, the leading projects and the key stats. And so we're working with Carbon Copy and Greenpill Writers Guild to do the 2025 updated version. So if anyone wanted to get involved there and help contribute, that would be awesome. And then we hopefully have a really nice kind of document report that you can may share, Corey, with some of the people you're talking about to say, hey, there actually is some, through the noise, there is some really interesting big picture stuff happening here. And yeah, the final thing is that Carbon Copy also have this impact dashboard that is also aggregating these various sources of impact data, whether it's amount of funding raised, credits retired, whatever kind of metric we might want to aggregate from across the refi space to really showcase how much is going on, and hopefully use that as a vehicle to raise more resources and et cetera, better coordinate the movement. So yeah, just wanted to contribute that piece, and if anyone wants to dive in and collaborate on that, that would be awesome. And I think it could be a cool part of this commons that we're building together.
Nice, thanks, Monty. Simon's got hopped up here and's got his hand up. Welcome up, Simon. Where are you calling from? And yeah, lay it on us.
Hey everyone, I'm in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta right now in Colombia. I was recently with Zachary in California. I know a lot of these faces on this call, although a lot of them I haven't met in person. So what I'm hearing, and I repeatedly hearing this within the circles that we operate, is this idea of federated organizations, a superorganism of people and organizations with shared purpose, shared vision, all working together towards the same broad horizons. And this is the thing that we need to start manifesting. And I think there's lots of people out there that are building these kinds of tools. But the resources that we all have right now that we can start pooling together without even worrying about finance for now is our attention. So like all of the people on this call, where do we follow up on this? Where do we have a group? Do we have a Telegram group where we can all be together? And do we have a means to be able to share, our needs so that we can see the needs of the network and we can start thinking about how we can collaborate? What I think is that on the one hand, we've got all of these nodes on the network, but what we need to focus on is strengthening the relationships between those nodes. We need to be investing in the relationships and the flow between the nodes on the network to really fortify those relationships so that we're a stronger network of people all working together towards these same vision, mission, goals, objectives, purpose. And the more that we can be in a shared space and start sharing resources, starting first of all with our attention, our time, our energy, the stronger those relationships are going to be, the stronger the trust within the network is going to be, and those relationships strengthen. They become the channels through which funding can flow and through which resources can flow.
I love it, 100%, Simon. And just to say, anybody who wants can DM me, and I will send you the link to a Telegram chat, which is Regen Commons I think it's called regencommons.com DAO organizing, and it's currently 39 members strong. Many of you, but not all of you, are in there. And I don't want to put it out on Twitter publicly lest it get botified. But if you DM me, I will send you the link to that Telegram group. And also, there's regencommons.com. There's a public forum. There has been some substantive conversations there on that public forum. I intend to be putting up a lot more documents. And then for people who are deeply engaged, there's a Google folder. I'm happy to share that with anybody that has, transcripts from things like this, um, design notes and ideas and other things that I've just been trying to throw. Anything that I'm touching, I'm just putting it in there, essentially to be able to train context for AI and ChatGPT to help me in my limited time and attention that I'm dedicating to this. So those are the three places. I'm happy to be a linkage to invite anybody who has some fire and some engagement into those collaboration spaces. Ed, welcome up. How are you doing? How's the weather down in the valley?
Oh, it's getting better. Starting to see a little green. You're probably not up in the hills yet, but what I wanted to say is regenerative is booming, both in the United States and around the world, and it's definitely in two kind of directions now too, which is really interesting. It's not just land stewardship and agriculture, but it's booming in the medical world with medical researchers because they're realizing the roots of health are in the soil and in our environment. And it's not just about your DNA, it's about your epigenetics and how your environment and your food affect you, and your gut biome connects to the soil biome. And the one thing that's happening is the science in regenerative is booming also. We know so much more about how the soil functions, the soil biome. We have metagenomics. We can understand chemistry a lot better, and so we can create plants and trees and everything that are so healthy that they're resistant to everything. And of course, the medical community is realizing that too, that, it's about your biome, it's about the nutrition and the food, the nutrient density. There's been so much work in metabolomics in the last couple of years, analyzing all the food, everything we grow, and what's the nutrient density and spectrum, and how bad is the state of that. We found about 90% of the food that people have access to, and I'm talking about the stuff in the outside of the supermarket, or your fruits and vegetables, your milks, your meats, all that are within the 10th to 25th percentile of their potential. And it's all, when we look at what is the number one cause that improves that, it's the soil biome. So, and of course, that's what we've been killing in our land stewardship in general, and certainly in agriculture. So it's really now the practitioners of this, whether it be the people, the doctors on the ground, the nutritionists, the consumers and the farmers and land stewards, are just hungry to get this new knowledge so they can implement it. And that's the biggest thing. I've been working with several young people that are looking at, can we create a new AI companion for farmers that is basically grown on nature science and isn't contaminated with some of the science of the past, which is, wake up in the morning and kill everything on the farm. and that's a good day, except the plants you're trying to grow. It's the opposite look at everything. And so can we create a clean system that can be a companion to land stewards so that they can then connect with other companions? Because it's all about context. It's all about your environment. Again, it goes back to epigenetics, which is really, we're learning, is much more the key to health. So anyway, that's, one thing I'm finding is that's it. People are aware of it now, and practitioners now, we just got to get them the information, and we got to stay up to date, because every few months, every time I listen to another podcast with one of the people working on this, something new is discovered. So It's happening so fast. How do we aggregate all that information and get it into a way that our practitioners can use it because they're hungry for it right now? I'll land it there.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Well, I think that that has echoes of what Jeremy was alluding to in his share around the library. So much of this is about curation. So much of this, as Corey was saying, and I'm just going to kind of riff a little bit and summarize because we're moving up towards the top of the hour here. I want to respect everybody's time. I know I've got a couple other things to do, so we'll keep it to an hour for this time around. But just kind of my synthesis of this is there's a real opportunity to uplift a movement, both through curation and engagement, through knowledge commoning, and through aggregating both the work that we're doing and coordinating our ability to fundraise for bigger amounts, to go after a bigger slice of the pie. And frankly, that's what the world needs from us. The world needs us to be embodying a high degree of coordination, collaboration, harmonization between these different initiatives that we're all leaders in our local communities, our specific Web3 initiatives, our specific farming, agriculture, land conservation, health initiatives. And, I think there's an intuitive resonance around what that looks like. And the devil's in the details. And there's a lot of heavy lifting and real detailed design work and architecture and agreements in order to pull something off. And my hope is we can build something that we look back on and find absolutely stunning and delightful. That we actually feel an embodiment of a regenerative architecture of collaboration in what's emerging that we're calling Regen Commons, right? I think that there's a unique opportunity at this moment that many of us have been working on the Sisyphean task of regen and regeneration and the regenerative movement for some of us for most of our lifetimes, for decades, for years. And I think sometimes it can be hard to recognize that the world has shifted under our feet and an opportunity that didn't exist months ago or a year ago or a decade ago does exist now, right? And I'm really excited. I really resonated with what Simon was saying. What is going to make this succeed is building trust and relationships and putting in effort now in a way that creates a solid foundation, because this movement, this community really needs to be mobilizing time, attention, and resources at many, many, many orders of magnitude uh, higher than we currently are. If we're flowing millions of dollars right now as a community, we need to be flowing trillions of dollars as a community. Just to use that as a unit
Show me
of
the
a
money, Gregory.
yeah, exactly. So may it be, and so it is. I think that that's what's becoming here. I hope folks will continue to carry the fire that you're feeling in your bellies and your hearts into the forum, here on Twitter and in Telegram. Let's hive this. Let's swarm this. Let's co-create this. Um, I know we're all in at Regen Network, and I am all in as an individual. And what that means is I'm all in to collaborate. But we all need each other to help shape this and craft this and make sure that it's real. It's the real deal. So I'm excited to do it with all you. Have a beautiful day. Sorry for those who have requested speaking spots. It's top of the hour here, so we're going to go ahead and shut this down. We'll be back up again next week, I think, and probably continue this as a forum for communicating about Regen Commons. I invite our other community members who are fired up to also create your own spaces to talk about this, to dialogue about this. I would love it if people tried to get in the habit of recording conversations you're having about Regen Commons. Maybe we chip all that in to a shared context. I think there's an amazing opportunity to create a hive mind So if we have divergent conversations, maybe there's dissonance, maybe there's disagreements, maybe there's risks that people see, maybe there's hazards you want to discuss. That's all super welcome. It'd be lovely to start building a repository of transcripts of what has you fired up, what has you concerned, what your ideas are, so that we can start to process that as a community. That's not something we could have done 18 months ago, but it is something we can do now. So let's do it. All right, thanks everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and have this space get shut down for now.
Thanks,
Hasta la
everyone.
generación siempre.
All right.
Thanks,
Adios.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Have a good
Over and
weekend.
out.
Bye.